Welcome to Exceptional Leadership. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. Though my focus is primarily pointed to leadership at an organizational level, let me assure you, most of what I share will translate to almost any aspect of life. Just tweak the info to fit your leadership role. Because whether you approach my content as a corporate leader, middle manager, small business owner, entrepreneur, or as a family member or friend, you are influencing someone. The question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? So let's take courage, exercise wisdom, and humbly invest in the people we are called to influence. Join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Welcome back, leaders. Today, I have a guest named Markus Neukom, and I am so excited to introduce you to him. Markus is a specialist in leadership, executive coaching, and change management. And don't you know, I want to talk about that a little bit more. But he's been a successful coach in his own right for many years, and he has some specific areas that he focuses on that I really want to dig into. And one thing that intrigued me and excited me at the same time was when I was reading about his passion for helping managers and professionals that are struggling to perform or progress in the workplace. You know, many of them are reaching a point where they're either reluctantly leaving or increasingly, sadly, they're being fired. And so it's not their lack of expertise that is failing them, but many only reach out for help when they're desperate, redundant, or on the brink of being fired. And many of us would understand this as being burnout. And so I work with a lot of leaders that I see exactly in the state. They're on the brink of it, but they're terrified to face it. So I'm really interested to hear Markus's perspective on that. Anyway, welcome, Markus, to Exceptional Leadership.
Thank you so much for having me, Anita. It's a huge pleasure.
It is our pleasure. So I just want to dive right in because there's so much I want to dig into with you. So first off, I'd love to find out from you, what is it that really either highlighted to you the need to help these managers and professionals who are struggling, or something that just was within you that made that a passion? Can you identify that?
Yes, I can. It goes back actually to the beginning of my career, Anita, where I served as a human resources manager. And as you can imagine, one part was letting people go or fire them. And I recall the one time where the manager's manager came to me after we had to let go someone and said to me, Markus, this person actually would need you now, but you can't. You have a role conflict. So that actually made me think. And I thought, gosh, what could have been done differently that we would not have had to let this manager go? And that was pretty much the kickoff when I went on my quest of human resources management.
I love that. It reminds me of something that I practice regularly. I have this thing where when I identify a problem, I look at it and I say, how can I turn that upside down? How can I turn that problem into a solution that can either prevent this type of scenario from happening again? Maybe not just for one, but for many people. But it works very well for me. So I love that you saw that need and then you began to work at it and begin to speak into that. So thank you for doing that level of work. So Markus, in your years of doing executive coaching and working in change management, I am sure that you have seen many things done exceptionally well. And I think you probably have seen many that have been done poorly, but like myself, you probably most often see mediocrity. So I wonder, could you tell us, in your estimation, what separates exceptional leaders from those who are simply mediocre?
I give you a twofold answer.
Okay.
On the one hand, mediocre leaders perform tasks and exceptional leaders empower people. I believe that's where I would differentiate the two like that. And the other thing is, you see, technical skills and IQ are all very important ingredients for effective leadership. But what I found out, what really separates an exceptional leader is the knowledge and the application of emotional intelligence.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit. I'm familiar with emotional intelligence, but some of our listeners may not be. So tell us what emotional intelligence is first off.
Okay, so emotional intelligence, in my opinion, consists of 5 parts. There is self-awareness, and in simple terms, it's being able to understand my own emotions, strengths, and weaknesses. And that's actually where it begins, where I see emotional intelligence. There's so many books written, right? There's so many shows about emotional intelligence. But I still feel this is one of the most undervalued skills and so needed everywhere in the businesses. So that's the first part, self-awareness. The second one is self-regulation. What I mean here is the control of my emotions and impulses. And, if we talk about mediocre leadership, we see that on a daily basis where emotions and impulses take over instead of being controlled. So that's the second one for me. The third one is motivation. What I have experienced that really exceptional leaders, they have an embedded desire to achieve, and actually just for the sake of achievement, not coupled to external factors like salary or status. Those are all nice. But those who are really exceptional, I feel they are driven by an inner purpose. So that's number 3. Number 4, empathy. And you see, exceptional leaders, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I found that they are so considerate of employees' feelings when making decisions. What is beautiful, they can pick up on subtle cues such as body language and tend to understand the importance of cultural and ethnic differences, something which is so needed right now. And in the end, if someone asks me what is the advantage of empathy, I say it's talent retention. Especially today where all these silent resignations are taking place. It's the ability to keep and develop good people. And the last one, social skills. Someone with a high level of emotional intelligence works under the assumption that nothing is important or nothing that is important can be achieved alone. It needs other people to do that. They usually have a network in place for when the time to take action comes. It's available. And it really shows that they both understand and control their own emotions and can empathize with other people's feelings. As you surely have experienced, Anita, yourself, they are usually expert persuaders, and they know when to make an emotional plea or when to appeal to reason. So that's in a nutshell how I personally see emotional intelligence.
And I love the way that you outlined that, Markus, and I agree with you. There's so much to unpack there. So one thing, it's interesting. Yesterday I was meeting with a client and we were having a conversation about exceptional leadership. And one of the things that we were discussing was the fact that so many leaders, that some of them will lie to themselves and they tell themselves that, one, they're not emotional, that they're just objective. They only use facts to make their assessments and their decisions, but that's not entirely true. If we unlayer enough of any situation, we're going to find that we have emotions driving our decisions. So I think that self-awareness piece is so severely lacking in many, not all, but in many. But the other thing that we were discussing is that It seems like there's finally becoming more social awareness to the need for us to acknowledge the emotions, to accept our own emotions and stop feeling guilty and stop beating ourselves up because we're humans and we have those emotions. But then to utilize them, as you said, in a healthy way, to be self-controlled. You know, we don't want to just go around making emotional outbursts on people. That's not going to do anyone any good. As a matter of fact, it's just going to confuse people and frustrate people. But when we are able to handle our emotions in a healthy way, to be honest and transparent with them, but yet in that way that does not jeopardize the confidence and the security that our people need to have in us as leaders, then we're able to reach people where they are. And the other thing that I find is when we are able to express our emotions in that healthy way, we become more trustworthy in the eyes of others. We end up discovering information that frankly we need to know, but if people don't trust us, they hide it from us. They avoid us, and they'll do anything to cover up something that frankly could be costing us time and energy, and certainly could be costing our organizations money. What are your thoughts on that?
I entirely agree. That's the short answer to it.
Yes, it's so amazing. Leadership is not for the faint of heart. You know, so many, when they're young, they start out and they want to be in a leadership position and are probably naturally wired for that if they have that desire. But leadership is one part practical, but it is one part emotional, and you need to have the balance between the two. And it's what I call the ebb and flow. What you were talking about, having that ability to go back and forth, it's just knowing when you need to have logic and practicality as your application, when you need to focus on the hard numbers or those results. That is a crucial piece. But it's equally crucial that you understand that you are working with human beings. And these human beings have factors taking place not only at work that are impacting their emotions, but in their home lives, in their personal lives. And often we don't know what those are unless we ask. And I know a lot of leaders that makes them uncomfortable. They want to avoid that. But in actuality, when your people feel like you care about them, there's almost nothing that they will do for you. They will bend over backwards. You talk about going in the extra mile. They'll go the extra 50 miles for you. If they feel like you have an empathy, as you said, for them and their circumstances, and it's genuine.
I definitely couldn't have said it better.
So, Marcus, and that's why I said I knew we were going to be like-minded. So let's talk about exceptional leaders and mediocre leaders. And so we've talked about some of the things that they do differently, but what are some of the outcome differences you see between them? So what kind of results do you see exceptional leaders get versus what you see a mediocre leader get?
I believe that one of the most important points you mentioned before, Anita, is that they can get the most out of their team while achieving their personal and professional goals.
Okay.
This is something which I really love to experience with my own clients. When they get to the point where they say, hey, my team would literally go to battle with me, and it doesn't jeopardize what I want to achieve for myself personally and professionally. And the vice versa is the mediocre leaders, they have teams, they don't trust them. They definitely don't go the extra mile, not to speak about the extra 50 miles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of finger pointing taking place. There is mistrust taking place, whereas a really exceptional leader can inspire confidence, which I feel is such an important quality to inspire confidence. It helps with effective communication. And what is so crucial today and so much missing is successful collaboration with others at the workplace. Like when I look at let's say my ACE examples, it's just amazing how their teams just walk along them, and they don't have to be pushed. They don't have to be pressured. They literally become self-driven, which I see as an amazing quality of an exceptional leader, to instill that thirst in their employees to want to do more, to achieve more, and to get better results. And at the same time, something that mediocre leaders have problems with are making difficult decisions, right? Resolving conflicts and the whole adaptation to changing business goals and circumstances. So that's definitely, to sum it up, something I see exceptional leaders being amazing at: making difficult decisions, which is so crucial, resolving conflicts, and adaptation to change and circumstances.
Marcus, as you were describing that, I was thinking about another part of the conversation I had yesterday, which was about today's employee. Now, this is definitely a generality. I know this is not the case for all, but there are a lot of employees out there that I feel like they're missing out on a benefit that maybe some past generations got to experience. And that is the sense of satisfaction, deep inner contentment that you get from doing a job well, from seeing it to completion and knowing that you've done your very best. And if it was hard, that reward was so much sweeter. But I think for leaders, what I'm seeing is a lot of them, they complain about the employees not working, not getting in and trying new things, not getting the job done. But in fact, what you just said, I think, is the missing element. Leaders are not understanding that they have people in the workforce and entering the workforce these days that have not been conditioned to do a job well. They've not been taught to complete it. They've not been educated on the importance of making sure all of those fine details are covered. So what can a leader do when that's what they're handed? Well, frankly, what you just said, collaborate with them. Nothing works more powerfully than for a leader to kind of get in the trenches every once in a while, work shoulder to shoulder to get their people started. You don't have to do the job for them. I hear so many leaders complain about that. That is not the case. If you can help your people gain their own confidence, their own comfort, they'll take the baton and they'll run with it 9 times out of 10. And frankly, in that 10th time, then you may have someone who's not in the right job fit anyway. And it may be time to make some kind of a difficult change. But most often, you're going to find that if you get in there and you work with them and you teach them, truly teach them, don't just throw a bunch of words at them and walk away. People don't only absorb 25% on average of what they hear. So even if you gave them the full instructions, they're not going to absorb all of that. You've got to show them. And you've got to show them with some kindness, some patience, some empathy. You've got to show them with some care. These employees need to know that you are there to support them and that you're encouraging them and that you're not going to abandon them. And so many leaders do not understand that they make people feel that way. They make them feel abandoned. They make them feel like you just throw a bunch of orders at me. You walk off. I didn't understand half of it, but then you're not there for me to ask questions, or it doesn't feel safe for me to ask you questions. What are your thoughts about that, Marcus?
It's spot on. You see, when I speak with managers, I call them managers before they become exceptional leaders. And when they complain about their employees, I usually listen for some time. And then I ask, whose problem is that? And as you can imagine, most of them say, it's the employee. is that no, there are no bad employees. There's basically only an inept manager or a leader. So once you take on the responsibility being the leader and the manager, actually I differentiate the two of them because I believe they're two parts of a whole. Then you will be surprised how your employees suddenly actually take the baton, as you said, and start running. They often experience, they fire people, right? They let people go, and then they hire new people. And guess what? The same story repeats itself.
It does, Marcus. And that's when you often hear people complain, you just can't get good help anymore. And frankly, the thing is, everyone who enters your door, they are coming in a pretty raw state. But as a leader, an exceptional leader, your mission should be to help polish that, to help educate and teach them. Stop berating people for not knowing what they don't know. If they don't know something as a leader, that responsibility is on your shoulders. And maybe you personally aren't the one to teach them. But then if it's not you personally, then you need to make sure that you have good training systems and you delegate well and you have people assigned who, by the way, have that talent or that ability to train well. I've got a business coaching client right now that there have been massive production issues, quality issues. They make products. And so what I just have been able to identify as their biggest invisible drain is their training. So their training process has been that we bring these new people in, we put them alongside someone with experience who hasn't been trained to train. By the way, they just do a pretty, a halfway decent job. And we have them with them for 2 or 3 days, and then we put them on their own machine. Well, here's the problem. I just was able to find out that as part of this training process, and if you could see my air quotes now, we have employees who are whispering to these new hires and they're saying, now don't hit your productivity levels. Because if you do that, they're going to expect you to do it all the time. So slow down a little bit. Sometimes, if you make this adjustment or that adjustment to the machine, well, then you can get an extra break. Well, that is not the kind of training that's helping this company make money. As a matter of fact, they've not been hitting not only their production goals, but they haven't been getting some of their orders out on time because they've been having this chronic issue. But what I was able to do is follow the trail, and it's almost like you become a detective and do this investigative work, but I follow the trail and found out it's originating there. So what I'm working with my client to do now is actually to implement a true training program. And this is something I've been saying to them for a while anyway, but now I've got the bones to back it up, if you will. And I'm saying this is costing you money. This is costing you product. All of the poor quality product that's happening, that's waste. That's material waste. You paid for that material, those supplies. You paid for the time. You can't get that back now. But what we can do going forward is we can work from what I call a preventable mode. We can set in place a solid training system. And we can make sure, by the way, that the expectations from the top down are clear at every level of employment so that everyone knows we do expect you to hit those production levels. If you want a job or if you want any kind of incentive or bonuses, which this company does participate in those things, then you have got to produce high quality product and you've got to get as many out as you can so that we do not break our customers' trust by not hitting their order timeframes. And so it's been really interesting to see that all play out and understand that the reason it was happening was there was a lack of accountability. There wasn't proper oversight. And from the very beginning, there weren't clear expectations and there was not a good training process that was put in place.
Yeah, lack of training is a huge issue today.
It certainly is. And, thank you for saying that. But honestly, Marcus, it took months to get there. And just think if the leadership there, and believe me, I mean, they're great leaders with great intentions, but if they would have understood the power of prevention, of making sure that they had their training in place. And by the way, that they were overseeing that the training was not just conducted in the way that they wanted it to be or needed it to be for their organization, but that they were driving what the process of what was created, of the decisions that were made. Don't just pass that off lethargically to someone else and say, well, here, I want you to create a training process. You need to have your eyes on that. What are your people being taught? And does that align with your company's mission and vision and value system? Because if it doesn't, then you need to go back to the drawing table and you need to rework that training process again.
Where I see an issue is very often managers and leaders, they don't really take responsibility which has been bestowed on them by their employers. It's not their money. They don't have a real stake in the game. Is that something which you observe as well? When you ask yourself, how can this happen? That no one seems to have seen it with this training department.
It 100% does happen. And one of the things, especially when I'm working with, from executive leadership down to your front line, one of the things that I almost have as a mantra is reminding people that when they treat the organization as if they owned it themselves, they were in charge of it themselves, they benefit in the end. If they put that kind of care into their work, then that ends up being recognized. And some people get frustrated. They think it should be seen sooner. Well, we can talk about what should be, or we can talk about what is. And I say that to leaders as well. But when you remind people, it's probably going to take longer than you actually want or believe it should for you to be recognized. But if you are persistent, if you are resilient, if you work with fortitude and you work with that kind of passion that says, I'm going to treat this as if I own it. Because in reality, as an employee here, I do own part of this. And you begin to operate that way, you start to see a change in results. And I'm telling you, if you do that consistently, leadership cannot help but notice that eventually. Some of them may have blinders on and it takes them longer than it should, but they will get there. And the fact is, right now we are in a time in the workplace where it's kind of an employee's market, right? So employers can't get enough. But I've been at this long enough, and you probably have too, Marcus, where you've seen the converse, where it was an employer's market. Yep. And there were many people who were let go. And I've worked with some of these folks. And so they had this chronic situation where they would go into a new job and they do well for a couple or a few months. And then next thing you know, they're getting write-ups or they're getting bad evaluations and they're released from employment and they can't figure out why. And almost every single time it goes back to attitude. It goes back to our self-talk. What are we saying to ourselves? And if we will turn that problem upside down and start telling ourselves, I'm going to treat this company, this organization, as if I was in charge, as if I owned it, and just see what happens. And I'm going to do that consistently for 90 days. I would challenge anyone to tell me that you don't get some positive results from that and that you aren't glad that you did. And if that's the case,
I 100% second that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I was going to say, and if you don't get the results, if you don't see some positivity, then again, maybe you're in the wrong job fit. Maybe that's not the right organization for you. And then maybe it's time to go someplace else. But if you do, go with appropriate self-talk, healthy self-talk, and remind yourself to continue to do that. Challenge yourself and see if you don't start seeing a change in your life. And I found for me, years ago, I mean, I was that young employee many years ago. And I remember
Mhm.
how poorly my self-talk drove me to decisions and choices and behaviors. But when I began to change that, it didn't just change in the workplace for me. It changed me in my entire life. I became happier. I became more satisfied and more content. And my anxiety diminished. And so many out there who are struggling with anxiety, hear this. When you begin to really work on intentionality, on what you're allowing to play in your mind, you can help yourself to feel better overall, just as a human being, just in that satisfaction you can have with yourself, instead of going through life and constantly feeling on edge and feeling afraid. And I know too many people who are living like that right now.
I second that. Absolutely. You see, when I started out as a leadership consultant, I wondered how can I actually educate my clients in the best way so they understand what I'm talking about. And I coined the term co-entrepreneurship. So they were not the owners, they were not the entrepreneurs, but I said to them, hey, think about, and it's actually as you said it, like as soon as you become a salaried employee, I am actually getting some stock in the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a stake for me in the company. So part of the company is mine. So I help my clients to develop this co-entrepreneurship, and you'd be surprised how fast actually their lives turn around, privately as well as business life. And the other thing, if that isn't enough, I tell them you should develop a mindset of a concierge. You know, a concierge in a five-star hotel,
Yes.
the one who is there to make everything possible, goes the 50 extra miles, as you so beautifully said it. And once someone understands, gosh, I'm a custodian in the company, I've been bestowed responsibility as a manager and as a leader. And what's really interesting, it doesn't even matter whether someone else sees it in the beginning. You know, the results will speak for themselves sooner or later anyway, but it's their self-image which starts changing immediately. Because, you know, putting someone into the position of a co-entrepreneurship, co-ownership, and being seen as a concierge who is in charge of the receptionists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically start seeing themselves almost like as a big brother to their colleagues, for example. And that is why I love my work so much, because I literally help those people, and I'm able to help those people to get out of their rut. You know, like most clients actually come to me with a question, Marcus, is this as good as it gets? Or is there more to life? And the beauty is everyone knows that there is more. Otherwise, they would not reach out to me. And what we're doing is exactly as you said it, with mindset change, we get them to the point where they start embracing that there is more and that it's actually there for them too. So it literally comes down to taking co-ownership as if part of the company belongs to you. And the second part is becoming a concierge with your mindset. So that literally changed my client's life like 180.
I love the concierge and the co-entrepreneur concept. And it is interesting. Words have power. And just
Yep.
speaking that to someone, that kind of verbiage can inspire them. You talked about inspiring earlier. That can inspire them.
Yep.
And it can drive hope. It can drive confidence. It can help them, stand up a little bit taller and feel better about the job they're doing, whatever that job is. And it also reminds me, right now I'm working on a digital course on personal branding and professionalism, because there's
Okay.
such a need out there for employees to understand that whether they are intentional about it or not, they are projecting a personal brand. Their personal brand is their reputation. Yep. Their personal brand is how other people view them. Their personal brand is what their actions and behaviors say about them as a human being in the workplace and frankly beyond. And professionalism is that commitment that we have that starts in our self-talk, where we say that we are going to do the very best job that we can. We're going to work and collaborate with others. We are going to do it at a high caliber, high quality, and we're going to do it with the end user in mind. We're going to think about how our work today is going to impact the people that we serve, because in some capacity, whether we're selling a product or whether we provide a service, we are serving others. And so professionalism is that commitment to doing it very well. So when people begin to understand that what they do day in and day out, starting with what they think, because we project what we think, that other people are responding to that, either negatively or positively, we actually can influence that response by how we carry ourselves, by the words that we speak. If you're going to be crass or vulgar, you know what? People aren't going to take you as seriously. It might be funny in the moment, but when someone needs something of importance, or if they are looking to someone to step up, maybe into a leadership position, that's not the individual they're going to look at. They're going to look at the person who does have a personal brand of professionalism. And so everything that you just shared is just reminding me afresh of why this is so needed out in the world. And as we both said, not only does it influence what happens to them at work, it can help them get promotions. It can certainly lead to raises. It can lead to opportunities that others may have gotten, but instead, because of your work ethic, your values, your consistency, you are the one who is tapped on the shoulder and given that opportunity. So there's so many benefits when we become intentional about our personal brand. And I love everything that you had just said about that, Markus. I love the alignment that we have in this conversation. So
same here. And you see, the other thing is, like, do you experience as well that those intentional, exceptional leaders, you know, when they change from or move from mediocre to exceptional, it actually affects their private lives as well?
Oh, 100%. 100. Because one, just the inner sense of how they feel about themselves is altered. There's a transformation that takes place inside. And we carry that into every interaction we have with every other human being. The other thing is, and it's interesting, it ends up helping to lighten their load at work a little bit. So there's a reduction in stress and tension. And oftentimes, there's a reduction in work hours because they're able to release and let go and delegate and trust a little more. And because they spend a little more time in the front end training and collaborating, it enables them to step away and allow their people, because they've been empowered and they've been equipped to do the job well, they're able to step back a little bit and oftentimes get more hours with their family, their friends, and then they get to do what I call refilling their cup. Because I remind my exceptional leaders, an empty cup has nothing left to pour out into anyone else. You've got to refill your cup. When you refill your cup, it just splashes out in a beautiful way in every aspect of your life.
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's exactly my experience. And, you know, that's when I get asked sometimes, how can you promise that sometimes between 30 to 50% gain of energy is a result of working with me? And I say, okay, let's do it. And you will see how much BS you actually produce on a daily basis simply by not being equipped with emotional intelligence. So that's something that fascinates me every time again. And, you know, you asked before, what do they do differently? And I would say one of the major qualities is embracing feedback and listen to understand.
Amen, Marcus.
And especially
Amen.
listen to understand, right?
Yes.
Not to think, what will I answer when the employee is done, or when my coworker is done, or when my boss is done, but listen to understand.
Yes.
I believe that is such a crucial quality which should be developed today.
I could not agree with you more. I've talked about it on this podcast. I certainly talk about it from my keynote presentations when I'm speaking. I do it when I'm coaching and training. Listening, I always remind people, this is a funny way to remember it. I always tell people, I believe God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we speak. And when we think about it from that way, but then we also remind ourselves to listen to hear. As you said, listen to understand the other person. And ask clarifying questions. Make sure you're understanding. Sometimes we convince ourselves we understand, but in reality, we're completely off in that speaker's intent. You have a responsibility to make sure that you truly understand. So ask those clarifying questions. Simply say, well, when you told me this, is this what you meant? And repeat back what you thought you heard.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear you say correctly? Yada, yada, yada. And then repeat it back. When you do that, it's amazing to me how many times, Marcus, I find out that I was completely off base from what they meant.
Same here.
It opens up a whole world of amazing opportunity.
Making assumptions, right?
Oh, yes. And we know what assumptions, we know what that makes out of us.
Yes.
So.
Exactly. Exactly. The other thing is, especially about embracing feedback, if I just may say that, emotional intelligence enables me to ask for honest feedback in positive and negative sense. You see, for me, there are always these tell signs if someone has a developed emotional intelligence or not. And one of them is definitely that they actually embrace feedback and request feedback in positive and negative. Because if someone hasn't developed emotional intelligence, they don't ask for the negative, nor do they know how to deal with it.
Yes.
So developing emotional intelligence, I believe, is really key.
I think you're right, Marcus, and it requires a certain level of inner strength. It isn't easy for any of us to deal with the sting that comes from hearing negative things about ourselves. But you are so correct. And I know when I've asked people, I want to know what you really think, your evaluation of me, of how I do things. How do I make you feel? That's a question that it makes people uncomfortable when you ask them. But if you let them know, I really want to hear this, because if there's an area that I need to work on, then I want to do that, but I can't fix what I'm not aware of. The other thing that I have found that's done for me from a leadership perspective is my willingness to be open to hearing the criticisms or the negatives about me. It causes other people to put their brave on, if you will, and they become braver about hearing their own. And when they see you willing to work on your areas of weakness, and we all have them, then it inspires them to work on theirs. And again, it's that thing of, as a leader, I can't say this enough. As a leader, we have a responsibility to first set an example. We can't just play boss and bark out orders. Our people, especially in today's culture and climate, our people have to see that we have a willingness to do what we expect, to walk it out. And if they don't see that, then it taints their view of them, their perspective of us. They don't trust us as a leader, and they will not 100% follow when we tell them that we need them to go in a certain direction. And that's a danger zone for any leader. And it is certainly not exceptional leadership.
You see, the same thing is true about admitting mistakes, right?
Yes.
Because that goes for me into embracing feedback, like the willingness to take responsibility when things go wrong. Because that's when your employees start actually doing the same thing.
Exactly. They're going to mimic and mirror what they see in us. Yep. As far as our behaviors. Mm-hmm. And there's often subtleties to that. Here's the thing, as human beings, we can convince ourselves that we hide certain weaknesses or qualities, and we don't hide them. That mask that we're wearing, there's little edges and corners where the truth seeps out. And we have to really guard against wearing the mask, because to me, it just adds another layer of distrust. People want to know why you're wearing a mask, or then they assume why you're wearing a mask. And oftentimes the truth behind a leader's mask is fear. They're afraid. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of others not believing in them. They're afraid that they're really not up to the task. They're afraid they're an imposter. Imposter syndrome is real, and there are many in leadership who don't truly have the confidence and belief that they should be there. But in fact, you are there. And that basis alone says you should be there. But the thing is, you can either be in that position and just kind of go along and not really challenge yourself, not really try to improve and just get by and hope that nobody sees the truth of who you are. Or you can say to yourself, I was placed in this position for such a time as this. I was created, my whole life was created on purpose, with purpose, in order to fulfill an abundant purpose. See, that's another thing that I teach, Marcus. But when we take on that, and then we step into it, and we begin to challenge ourselves, we begin to look for and ask where the weaknesses are that maybe we're not even seeing in ourselves, and we begin to undergird those, and we begin to strengthen that foundation. And then we parlay our strengths and we empower other people, and we do all of that. We can grow into exceptional leaders. Exceptional leaders are not born. Exceptional leaders are created. But again, it starts in our own minds. What are we saying to ourselves? And then how are we behaving out of that self-talk? That's the seed that starts the growth. And we can either have a growth that's very fragile and feels like it's going to maybe fall apart at any time, or we can have a growth that shoots up from the ground because we have that commitment, we have that intentionality, we have those practices that we participate in, those exercises that strengthen us. And because of that, we grow tall and we grow strong, and other people can count on the strength that we have to offer. And then we in turn strengthen them, and they become strong in their own right. And I really believe that exceptional leaders do inspire other people to grow. They do encourage other people's strength. And when they do that, and they step back, and sometimes those other people don't even see the imprint that that leader has had on them, but that's okay. You don't have to do it to get credit. You just do it because it makes a difference. And at the end of the day, and at the end of our lives, isn't that the most important thing, Marcus, that we make a difference in this world?
Absolutely is. Yeah, absolutely is.
Well, Marcus, this has been such a pleasure. I have enjoyed every aspect of this. Before we go, I would love for you to share with our listeners how they can find out more about you and maybe more about what you have to offer as you're making your difference in the world.
Thank you very much. So the easiest way to find me is on my website, which is Markus Neukom. It's Markus with a K, Neukom with one M.com. So that's markusneukom.com. or my LinkedIn profile with the same name, Markus Neukom. I have the ability so they can reach out to me, and if they just want to discuss something, they can just book a 20-minute, I call it inspiration call, and that's exactly what it is. I just love to get to know people and, to help them and to hear what they have to share. So these are the two platforms, LinkedIn, Markus Neukom, and my website, markusneukom.com.
Amazing. And I'm going to spell that for our listeners just to make sure they can absolutely find you. So it's MarkusNeukom.com. And again, Markus Neukom on LinkedIn. Markus, thank you so much for being our guest today. It has been such a pleasure, and I want to just kind of cheerlead you and say, keep on doing what you're doing, because the world needs people like you doing that.
Thank you so much for having me, and that was a real pleasure.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. And I just want to remind you of a truth. If you are not leading at the level that you want to be at, remember, it is never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. You can start today. You can start making a difference. You can help the world become a better place. You can begin to lead with intent. Your family, your friends, the people you work with, your community, in your church, in our nation, across the planet. Whatever opportunities come your way, remember that did not happen by accident. And by stepping up and leading exceptionally well, you will help fulfill the purpose you were created for.